Liam Fox, thank you very much for joining us on Bloomberg TV. You've announced the UK's first trade commissioner today for China, and he says he wants better market access for areas where the UK excels. Clearly financial services is going to be an important part of that picture. What specific goals do you have for UK-China financial services? We've heard a lot about the London-Shanghai Stock Connect. How soon do you want to see that up and running?
We want to see it up and running as soon as we can, as soon as it's a practical option. We also want to see a gradual opening up of the Chinese market in services in general. Obviously this is an area where the UK excels, and we have a lot of skills that China is very keen to capture. So everything from design, also then we start to look at areas like education. Our educational exports from the UK this year topped 17 billion. China's very keen to see some of that expertise coming here. And when you look across the whole of our service sector, and we have a very large number of service sector representatives in our business delegation here today, you can see the tremendous opportunities that open up for both of us, because our ability to bring in and lever in some of these services will actually help some of the Chinese sectors mature even more quickly.
Okay, so in order to, for example, do formal free trade agreements after Brexit, you need to leave the European Union Customs Union. But could you see a reality in which the UK decides to stay in the common external tariff for all goods, for example, and focus on extending services in future? Would that work for you?
It's very difficult to see how being in a customs union is compatible with having an independent trade policy, because we would therefore be dependent upon what the EU negotiated in terms of its trading policies, and we'd be following behind that. So we have to be outside of that to be able to take advantage of those growing markets. If you look at the IMF, they've been telling us that 90% of global growth in the next 10 to 15 years will occur outside continental Europe. That's where we need to be focusing our attention. And China is a huge market. Just the single statistic that by 2030, China will have 220 cities of more than 1 million people. The whole of Europe will have 35.
Yeah.
You get an idea of the scale of the opportunities that are available in Asia Pacific in general.
So just to be clear, a customs union arrangement in the future you think would be really hard for your vision of global Britain after Brexit?
We have to have an independent trade policy. One of the reasons for leaving the European Union is to take control, and that's not possible with a common external tariff.
Okay, thank you. You spoke at the launch of the Grassroots Out Brexit campaign, which we'll remember from way back at the beginning of this whole process, and you said then that a pro-EU establishment in Britain was peddling fear for the British people. Do you fear that some of that sort of tendency is still around, perhaps among those who leaked that draft unfinished analysis earlier in the week?
Well, I think you compare the rhetoric with the reality. If you remember, we were told that voting to leave the European Union would push our economy into recession, we'd see a rise in unemployment, we'd see a flocking of investment out of the UK. What have we actually seen? In the last year, we've seen more foreign direct investment into the UK than at any time in our history, a record number of people in employment, continued economic growth, and on top of all that now, we've got a 14% rise in our exports. Hardly the economic Armageddon that was predicted, but some of us, if you remember, said that this would be a trigger for a much more optimistic Britain. And I think that in the relations that we're seeing with China, they're recognising just that.
You're concerned there's a sort of an element that won't yet accept Brexit in the
Well,
British...
I think there will always be an element that will be not reconciled to the democratic wish of the British people. I think that we've been given an instruction. I think it's now our duty to carry that out to the best of our ability. And I hope that once we do leave in 13 months' time, that people will then decide to pull together for the sake of our national interest.
Great. So the British Cabinet is in the process of finalising its aims for the final stage trade agreement with the European Union. Are you close to getting that agreement in Cabinet?
Well, we're very close to agreeing what our next steps will be, but you will not be surprised that I'm not going to be discussing that on air.
Fair enough. Final quick question on Theresa May. You've known her for decades. She's come in for a lot of criticism recently. What would you say her best qualities are that you'd like your colleagues to bear in mind?
I would say that her middle name is resilience, and that's exactly what she's showing, and I do wish more people could have seen the commitment she was showing to Britain's national interests on this trip to China. I think it was inspiring, and it's had a great reaction here in China.
Liam Fox, thank you.